Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Andrew Demers. I'm the Communications Director here at the New Hampshire Insurance Department. I'm joined by my colleagues, Commissioner Bettencourt, Deputy Commissioner Nyhan, and James Fox, our Property and Casualty Director. Appreciate you joining us for this conversation on deceptive consumer guarantee contracts. This is an interesting topic that we've been working on here at the Insurance Department for a little bit. And so to kick things off, I'll turn it over to Commissioner DJ Bettencourt.
Well, thanks so much, Andrew. As Andrew mentioned, my name is DJ Bettencourt, and I have the pleasure of serving as the Commissioner of the New Hampshire Insurance Department. So for those of you who have logged on to our previous webinars, you know that one of the things that we try to do is to raise issues of importance to consumers. And so for this month, we want to talk a little bit about some concerning things that we are seeing around consumer guarantee contracts. Now, I want to offer a brief disclosure before we jump into the program today. And that is, it is always important to remember that when we raise these issues, it is not to impute the product, and it is not to belittle the companies that offer these products. We know that there is a place in our insurance ecosystem for these important products that do benefit consumers. And we also know that there are a lot of great companies that are doing great work and doing things the right way so that the consumer is getting the benefit of those products. However, we are seeing some increased issues coming through our consumer division as it pertains to these products, and they involve a number of things around marketing tactics. We are seeing things like high pressure sales tactics, misleading language, impersonation, fear mongering, and unsolicited calls and mail going out to consumers that are causing those consumers real harm. So today we want to help consumers understand what these products are, what some of the practices that we are seeing that are of concern to us, and how people can avoid some of the trouble that we are seeing. So that is the goal of our presentation today, and we're looking forward to it. And at this point, I turn things over to James Fox and Keith Nyhan.
Thank you, Commissioner. Again, my name is James Fox. I'm the P&C Director here at the New Hampshire Insurance Department. And so we're talking about consumer guarantee contracts. And we're talking about really seniors issues in relation to those contracts. So we're going to have our statute that currently exists, which is RSA 415C. That's a consumer guarantee contract statute. And then we're also going to discuss a little bit later a bill that we suggested to the legislature that's going through the process right now to change 415C. So I guess the first question is, what are service contracts, consumer guarantee contracts? So they go by different names is what we keep jumping around. But basically, a lot of times people think of as extended warranties. So whether you're buying a small consumer product and you're checking out and they ask you whether it's on Amazon online or at a store, do you want to buy an extended warranty that'll protect you? That's a consumer guarantee contract. Or if you're buying a car, maybe people have gotten that sale at, would you like to buy an extended warranty in case there's a problem with your car after your manufacturer's warranty expires? Those are the products we're talking about. Now, as the commissioner said, we're not impugning the product generally. The issue we're seeing is, I would say, the who. So we have three groups that we're talking about. Let's call them the good companies. And a good company would be someone, I would say, who's registered with the department. And then who have contracts that aren't deceptive in and of themselves and have good claims handling, that they're applying the contracts fairly and processing claims quickly. And also, as the commissioner said, that the marketing tactics are within what we would view as appropriate. He mentioned some of the issues we've had, which I'll talk a little bit about later. So those are the companies, and that's the basic product. So now you might ask, well, you're the insurance department. This doesn't sound like insurance, and it's generally they're not insurance. They're a product that's sufficiently similar to insurance in design that the legislature decided to put them with the department to regulate. The RSA 415C has been around for 40 plus years. I would say we've always talked about it here, as long as I've been here for 12 years, as regulation light. It's in the insurance statutory scheme, but it's got its own statute, and pretty much only that statute and part of the unfair insurance trade practices statute applies to it. So a lot of our laws don't apply to it. So that was kind of the background. So it's been around for 40 years. We've had kind of a light touch with it. We hadn't seen, I don't think we'd seen a lot of problems with it, but recently, that, in our opinion, that's changed. And the two things we've probably seen around it that have concerned us the most, I guess the number one thing is the marketing. So we see these things, it's called an unbranded flyer. So like, what is an unbranded flyer? It's something with no name on it. And when you read it, as the commissioner said, it has something like, you must act now, like you're at risk, you could be liable for damages, that kind of stuff. So that is, can be scary. And, maybe it would be something that I might go, oh, I'm not worried about that, and throw it in the trash. Or look at this, doesn't have anybody's name on it, even I put it in the trash. But if you're a senior, and you see that, you might see something that sounds very official at the top, like your registration card. And then they're like, oh, well, I have a registration card here. I think I'm supposed to register or something. And then there's a phone number on there, and there's an identification number. So there's no name of a company, no name of a seller, no name of an obligor, which is like an insurance company for these products. It's just a phone number. And then our concern, I would say, is then we've had examples of this, is that the confused senior in particular, now there's a lot of seniors that don't have these issues, but kind of like more dementia type situation, will call a number, and then they'll spend, time on the phone with whoever they're talking to. And then that company will get the person's bank account numbers. And then all of a sudden a charge shows up in the person's like checking account, but no policy shows up, and no other contact from that company. Basically, they've obtained amount of money from the person, and then we also have the concern that those account numbers are now kind of out there. So then the person may have to change bank account numbers. And, if you're a senior, that could be very complicated for a senior. They might get their Social Security checks from there. They might get their retirement checks, say, from the state from there. There are all these complications that maybe for us wouldn't be that problematic, but for a senior, it can be a major problem. And so that's probably a driving force. And also on the same level, we have seniors receiving phone calls. Same phone calls, high pressure tactics, wanting your account numbers, the senior getting confused and giving out the numbers, and then once that happens, they've exposed their bank accounts, and they've also exposed their phone number. So we've had reports from several seniors that say their phone never stops ringing, and so then maybe a senior that's had the same phone number almost their whole life, or like decades, has to change their phone number. And if say they have a memory problem, that can also be problematic. So there's a very vulnerable population here. And we've had basically a change in these consumer guarantee contracts to be what we view as targeting seniors. So when Commissioner Bettencourt, heard about this, he's like, we got to focus on this, and we got to find a way to solve the problem for all the residents of the state of New Hampshire generally, but also primarily for these seniors who are extremely vulnerable to this. And if you wanted to just judge, the concern, obviously, if it wasn't working, we wouldn't have these companies continuing to do it. Seniors get, they'll get multiple flyers a week. They're like little postcards. They'll get calls constantly. So it's something we felt on a state level for the residents of New Hampshire, we needed to take on. So the commissioner had the consumer division looking at it and focusing on it. He had the market conduct division looking into doing exams. That's what they do. So they go and look at companies to figure out what the companies are doing, and also having the fraud unit and the enforcement unit look at the issues. And I can tell you, so I'm the head of market conduct. So the market conduct unit, I can tell you, when we call sometimes these companies, and again, not the good companies, let's say the dubious companies or the complete scams, the other two categories. Sometimes they don't even talk to us. They don't know who we are. They don't care. They just want to know, what's the identification number on the car, please? And we'll go there, tell us the identification number. They have like a script they're using. So, and then they'll hang up on us when we try to tell them we're the regulator, and we're trying to find out who the obligor is. So that is on the market conduct side. I know Keith, who is now deputy commissioner, but used to run the consumer division, can give us a little bit of insight into what he's seen on the consumer side. Keith?
Yeah, thank you very much, James. This is Keith Nyhan, Deputy Commissioner, and it's probably a pretty good segue. James did a nice job of outlining for us some of the concerns we have on the front end of the consumer experience, which is the aggressive sales tactics. Obviously, preventing those sales of those bad companies is one key component of consumer protection. However, we do have a strong consumer services unit that handles cases, I can't say daily, but weekly, from consumers who have been taken advantage by one of these aggressive companies. Just to kind of put it in some perspective around it, as of Friday afternoon, our consumer division has handled 97 formal submissions with complaints concerning consumer guarantee contracts. Of those, 33 were in-depth investigations. And probably what's most notable is over those 30 investigations, there was a return of over $30,000 to New Hampshire's consumers. What do these investigations look like? Very typically, it's about coverage which doesn't really exist. You know, a consumer buys a policy or a contract and believes, for example, a home appliance or a furnace would be covered if it malfunctions. One of our larger case recoveries is a situation exactly involving a furnace, and I'll just read you a note here. The person actually filed the claim with the company, and the company denied that the product was even covered. Person contacted us here at the insurance department. We reached out to the company, started asking some very pointed regulatory type questions, and within about 30 days, the consumer received a check for over $5,000. We also hear of coverages that's being sold. Sometimes it's duplicate coverage. We've frequently been able to recover premiums for individuals if they have duplicate coverage. We also find on warranty claims, it's not uncommon for one of the warranty companies to claim something as a maintenance item rather than a covered item that had been broken, and we can certainly contact the company. And again, through a series of questions and sometimes some regulatory force, we'll say, or sometimes we compel the companies to make consumers whole. But again, we have investigated almost 100 cases this year alone, recovering more than $30,000. So my message to consumers is, if you purchased a home warranty contract or an automobile extended warranty contract, and you find that when you try to use the product and something doesn't seem right, the company is denying coverage, reach out to us here at the consumer division. Our consumer services hotline number is 1-800-852-3416. And on that, James, I'll turn it back to you, and you can walk us through the legislative piece.
And I would just add to what Keith said. So with the complaints that we've received, I would also say that if a company is taking an extreme position on, let's say, something like an exclusion that doesn't pass what I used to call a straight face test, that company, at this point, there's a high probability that company will have a market conduct exam. So I also encourage, obviously good companies don't have to worry about that, but other companies to really think about training for how some of their exclusions should apply, because we've seen some application of facts to particular exclusions that is really hard to believe. So with that, so obviously what we're doing here was one of the commissioner's ideas is to, like, let's get the word out to people as best we can. Let's get the word out to the companies that this is an important issue to us, and it's going to be an important issue to us going forward. And another thing that the commissioner wanted to do is he wanted us to take a close look at RSA 415C to see how we could, as you say, hit the sweet spot of still, letting them operate as businesses. We're not trying to, to tell them exactly how to run their operations, but so, let's take a look at the mandatory minimums that we're requiring to make sure that we have the tools to be able to protect consumers. Because as I said earlier, especially these unbranded mailers, we don't even know who we're calling. So it's a little hard to enforce something when you're not even sure who you're calling or where they're located. So what we did was we went through, and Emily Doherty, who's not here today, but she helped a lot. She's the product line attorney. We went through the current statute and tried to take a look at each section to see how we could improve it to make it more protective for consumers. And then so we put a draft together, and then we gave that draft to entities representing the good companies, because the good companies have said that they also don't want the dubious and scam companies operating, because it just makes their industry look bad. So we've worked with them, and we've also worked with entities on AARP comes to mind, trying to get input generally, or if anyone else give us specific input to make sure that we're also not unintentionally giving something up that would be very helpful to consumers. So if I were to break it down into like the big categories of things that we currently are going to have, if the bill goes through, we anticipate it will. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to have more information about the obligors and the sellers. So again, the obligor would be more like the insurance company in the insurance world, and the seller would be like a producer. So what we're going to do is we're going to have, obviously we already have the names of the obligors. We're going to have the obligors tell us at certain intervals who their sellers are. So we'll be able to match that up fairly easily. And then also, if they have, we're going to basically outlaw unbranded mailers. So they have, every mailer in New Hampshire will have to have the full information about the seller and information about the obligor. So we know, who to contact to try to fix the problem if we have a problem. And a lot of that problem is, as the commissioner said, high pressure tactics. We don't want mailers that are scaring people. And then we're going to also, so the 415C statute had some unfair insurance trade practice language in it. We're importing, I would say, in terms of claim practice, all of it. So a lot of the unfair insurance claim practices language is now going to be fully included in 415C to give greater protection to consumers, and also to allow give greater authority, I would say, to our enforcement team to be able to, when we see problems, be able to fix them by pointing to a specific law. So that should be hugely helpful. And the last one, which I think is also very important, we're going to require all the contracts to be filed with us, which is, be a lot of contracts. And then what we're going to do is similar to what we do in commercial insurance. We're going to have the ability to audit them. We're going to have, so we may look at a sample of them. We may pull some, randomly and see what we see. Or if we have a problem with a company come through a consumer, we can then, as part of that investigation, we can pull a contract up here so we can see the contracts. Obviously, we don't want contracts, say, in the dubious land. That would be taking away almost everything they give, because then the contracts become illusory, and that's something that in insurance and in 415C is inappropriate. So we think that's pretty much going to be there's other aspects, but they're more lesser importance. The focus, and then we'll let that operate. Usually how we do things here is we'll let it operate for a period of time, not days, but a period of years. And then we'll take a look at how it's running, what the consumer complaints look like, whether we still see unbranded mailers. But you can take unbranded mailers as a good example. So once the law goes into effect, it'll make those unbranded mailers illegal. So that it'll be much easier, much cleaner for the department to say, if you receive an unbranded mailer, that is an illegal mailer, and you should do no business with them as a matter of law, not as a matter of common sense, as a matter of law. So that's that. We have high hopes for the bill and how the new 415C is going to operate, and we'll see. And if we have to make corrections, we'll do that. And so the last thing I wanted to talk about was just, kind of like tips. The last tip's the most important tip. But the first tip is obviously always read your contracts. As of course, always say, you should read your contract. So if you're thinking of buying one of these products, you should ask to see if you can see a contract. Or if you get a contract, you should read your contract. If you get an unbranded mailer, I would throw it immediately in the trash. Do not respond to unbranded mailers. Why is someone afraid to put their name on something? Like, you don't turn on the television and see, like, you know, an insurance advertisement, and they don't tell you what insurance company it is. They just say, okay, please call this phone number, we'll give you insurance. And if someone's not going to put their name on something, there's a problem. As we've said many times in many contexts, if you do have a problem, you should definitely call the insurance department, and we will help you as best we can. Obviously, it's harder with the scam companies, but Keith did a fabulous job, and his successor, Robert Tierney, is I believe also do a fabulous job. And the last thing I'd say, which is hugely important, and I wanted to make sure I make a point of, if you have you know, parents who are seniors who have some memory problems, or, you know, you think you have some concerns about, it's so important that you find a way to help them with this issue. You know, we had one consumer complaint where the person only saw it because they were looking at their parents' checking account, and they're like, what is this on the checking account? And then it looked like insurance information. So like we brought it in, they brought it to us, and Keith ran it down and got the matter resolved. And that person had purchased multiple service contracts, and Keith had got them all straightened out. But that was only really came to our attention because the you know, the child of the parent was found it. So if you might think, oh, my parents have never had this problem, but they might have. So you should definitely check their checking account or any of their financial information to make sure that this hasn't happened to them. Because again, in the cases I'm talking about, once the contracts were sold, which we don't even know if they're really contracts were never issued, and they basically, the money just came out of the account. And the second time, it was a recurring charge. They were going to make recurring charges every month. And you know, I wouldn't like hope that a bank's going to find it, because the bank's not going to locate that kind of stuff. So there's definitely a personal responsibility for the residents of New Hampshire, and we're trying to give enough tools here, so we'll protect as best we can. But there's nothing better than a family member protecting a family member. And the last thing I'll say is, if you're a company out there, we're definitely going to be making sure that compliance of the new statute is where it needs to be. And if you're, you know, not one of the good companies, if you think you may be one of the dubious companies, you should definitely have training. You should definitely review your marketing material, make sure you're not violating the new marketing standards. Train your people, make sure they're not, you know, trying to cut corners on claims and all of that stuff. And again, I would like to end just that, you know, there are plenty of good companies too, and that this is not directed to them. And I think I'm done. I think we'll throw it back to the commissioner for any final remarks.
Well, thank you, James and Keith. I think that was very informative. I would just emphasize a couple of things that they raised. The first is obviously acknowledging that the department is going to move forward with a legislative change that will hopefully be adopted by the legislature. And to give you a little bit of insight as to the mentality that the department has when we think about whether or not to seek a legislative remedy to a problem, we have a couple of different metrics that we try to measure. The first is, have we identified a serious issue that is impacting consumers? And I think, as James and Keith have both well articulated this afternoon, there is a very, very serious issue here. In addition to the example that James cited, I had once heard a story of one of these companies who had once called a single consumer 100 times in a single day, trying to entice that senior to purchase one of these products. That is the type of tactics that we are seeing that are obviously of great concern to us. And the second consideration is, do we have the regulatory tools necessary to address that issue? And here we don't. We are a little bit lacking. And so we're going to seek to try to get more of those tools that we need to protect the consumer. And the other critical factor is, are we dealing with an issue that is disproportionately impacting a vulnerable group of consumers? And here again, the answer is yes, because the consumer that we are really concerned about in this scenario is that senior citizen who is particularly vulnerable to getting caught up in one of these products without really understanding what they're getting themselves into or what the agreement actually includes. And so, as James said, what we've tried to do here is to find the appropriate balance, to find the balance between ensuring that we have the tools that we need to protect consumers, while also ensuring that we are not burdening or overly regulating the industry such that we are constricting the ability for the consumer to have access to the types of products that they need. And I think that we have done good work here. And I do want to say that we are fortunate that we had great collaboration with industry on this proposal. The companies that are doing good work in this space obviously want to ensure that they are not getting lumped in with the dubious companies. They want to make sure that consumers can have confidence that when they sell these products, they're doing so in an appropriate way in which the consumer gets the benefit of what that product provides. And so we were able to get some great collaboration, some great feedback that I think is going to make this proposal a very, very good one, both for industry and for the consumer. Two other quick things. First is, as Keith said, and I think we just put it in the chat box, should any consumer have a question or concern, do not hesitate to contact our consumer division. They do a great job and they are very responsive. And to James's other point, if you should get one of these unbranded marketing materials, one of these dubious looking marketing materials, if right before you throw it in the garbage, you would like to scan it and send it to us, absolutely do that. You can scan it and send it to us using the consumer division's email address, and our team will review it. And we'll take a look and we'll get back to you to let you know whether or not this is something that's legitimate or if it's something that is not quite so legitimate. We can help you through all of that and to understand what you're reading and what you're seeing there. So those would be my points of emphasis to kind of wrap things up. But at this point, I'll turn it over to Andrew to see if there are any questions in the chat box.
I don't see any questions in the chat box, but we'd like to take the opportunity now to invite you, if you have any, to please post them in there. Or, of course, you can always email the communications unit here, communications@ins.nh.gov, and we'll be happy to point you in the direction of the right subject matter expert. Our enforcement email is in there, as well as our consumer services email. We encourage you not only to scan those, take a picture with your cell phone, but feel free to drop them in the mail to us as well. Getting our hands on these questionable mailers will help us better regulate the market, and we appreciate your help with that as well. Not seeing any questions, I guess we'll just throw an invite out to next month's webinar, where we'll be discussing understanding the claims process, and we'll also be talking a little bit about the agent company consumer relationship and what you need to know as it pertains to the claims process there. So if that's of interest to you, and we think it's probably of interest to many consumers, we invite you to tune into our webinar next month. As always, we appreciate you joining us, and we hope you have a great day. You can always find our webinars on our YouTube page. Thanks for joining us.